For those of you who haven't read the newsletter, staying safe online today is becoming more difficult for the regular people that don't have the background in understanding how online hacking and scams work. And my God, there's a lot of them. Computer Systems Security Specialist Brad Melrose will tell us how to avoid being a victim to online predators. His talk will explain how hackers exploit the basic human nature for their own malicious purposes. Brad has worked for a municipal police force in Canada for 10 years, as well as systems security administrator, over which period of time there wasn't a single security breach due to the effective security measures implemented by Brad. So I'm sure you will have a lot of questions later, but time permitting, he may answer them outside if all the questions take up a lot of time here. So let's welcome Brad Melrose to the stage and tell us all about hacking.
Good morning, everybody. We can have the first slide, please. I'm going to do this presentation a little bit differently than most presentations. I'm actually going to be taking questions during the presentations and try to make this as interactive as possible. So the way this is going to work is that there are two gentlemen with microphones. If they could stand up and identify themselves. We've got one over here, we've got one over here. If you have a question during the presentation, please stand up. One of the gentlemen will come over and stand behind you. And when I see two of you standing there, I will interrupt the presentation and take the question at that time. Please keep your question on point to what I'm talking about. If your question is too specific or too personal, I probably won't answer it at that point. We'll save it to the end if there's time to get into it. But just general questions about what I'm talking about at the time, we can flush out during the presentation. So with that, we're going to get started. So there's different types of security threats. You've probably all heard of spam and viruses. They affect everybody, large corporations and individuals. For corporations, they can be expensive. For individuals, they're more annoying than anything else and might cost you money out of your pocket. So I'm going to get into those in detail. We'll also talk about phishing. Phishing is basically where you receive some information asking you some questions that you answer, and when you answer those questions, you give information to people that you're not expecting. And then I'm going to talk about spear phishing, which is a form of phishing, but it's more targeted specifically to you at the time. So this presentation was originally built for corporations. I've given this numerous times, mainly executives of companies. So I've tweaked it a bit to talk to you individuals here who aren't necessarily dealing with stuff at the corporate level. But I always ask companies this question: what is your biggest security threat? Anybody have an idea what a biggest security threat for any company would be? Email. The employees. That is the correct answer. And that would be everybody in this room. You're your own worst security threat. So you might be asking yourself, why? Well, it comes down to hackers being creative and using personal traits of humans against themselves. Curiosity being a big example. Most people are curious. Somebody sends you something. Click this link for the surprise. You do. Unfortunately, the surprise you get is not the surprise you were expecting. So, spam and viruses. They're annoying. You have to sift them through your inbox. You don't want to have to deal with them. It's a good way to get ransomware. The thing with spam is that they send out millions and millions of messages. So let's say somebody's trying to, sell you the latest drug to, stop the aging process. they'll send out 100 million, 200 million, a billion emails. And they'll get maybe 5 or 10 replies. Well, that's a win for them. 5 or 10 people is plenty of people to exploit for sending out millions because it costs them, virtually nothing to do it. So ransomware is, usually delivered in spam. It's click this link for whatever reason. And then you do, and you get something on your computer that encrypts your files, and now they want to be paid, usually in Bitcoin, to recover the data. And it could be expensive, right out of your pocket. The latest one that I've seen is that you've probably all heard about cryptocurrency and miners. Miners generate money by paying for transactions. Well, the latest spam actually installs a mining software on your computer. So when you're not actually doing anything, your computer is running in the background really slowly, trying to mine for whatever the cryptocurrencies are without your knowledge, and then the hackers are making money based on your computing horsepower. So that's becoming a current trend. This article was published by the Government of Canada a few years ago. It basically lists the 5 things that indicate that maybe an email you're looking at might be spam. Does it ask for sensitive information? Does it use scare tactics, etc.? Basically, the kinds of things that an email that you would receive wouldn't contain. They basically try to do things fast and quick before you have a chance to think about what you're doing to get you. And these are just some of the traits that might exist in something that's not legit. So here's an example of some ransomware. The university in Calgary, somebody in the university received an email, clicked on it, and it started encrypting all the files on their servers and basically shut the university, or the part of the university, down. So they paid $20,000 to get their data back. So now, these are some of the things that examples of what phishing is. It can be used for fraud and identity theft. So, your bank account's been compromised. Please click this link and enter your username and password on this form to verify your account is valid and your transactions are valid. Well, the link is going to be, it's not going to be what you would expect it to be. It's going to take you to a site that looks like what you would expect, but it's actually not a legitimate site. It's a fake site. You start filling information out on that page, and now you've voluntarily given it to the hackers, and now they can hack your account. People don't get hacked. That's a misunderstanding. You voluntarily hack yourselves. They send you something, you click on it, you fill in the information voluntarily, and that's how you get hacked. So for example, Facebook. People's Facebook accounts get hacked all the time. It's not that they're actually trying to guess your password, you're giving it to them. They might send you a link saying, please log in with Facebook or whatever, and you enter your username and password for Facebook into that web page, and now they've got your Facebook credentials. You gave it to them. They didn't hack you. Okay, here's an example. This is from Hotmail. It's basically saying, we've got issues, please log in to confirm your identity. You click on that link, it's going to take you someplace other than Hotmail that looks like Hotmail. You enter your username and password, and now they've got access to your email. So it's really that simple, and that's how you do get hacked. Let's go back to Facebook for a second. How many of you use Facebook? Show of hands. Okay, a good percentage of you. Of all those people that use Facebook, how many people let everybody in the world see who their friends are? Nobody? Your friends are invisible to anybody who's not one of your personal friends on Facebook? Okay, a couple of hands. Basically, that's used for Facebook cloning. What they will do is they will take your public information, your profile picture, your description, anything you put publicly, create an identical Facebook profile, and then send a friend invite to everybody on your friends list because they can see it. If they can't see your friends list unless they're a friend, now they can't get into your account, or they can't clone it and pretend to be you. So there's all kinds of things like that. So you should never let your list of friends be publicly viewable, only viewable to friends you already have. And you should never accept friend requests from somebody you don't know, because you don't know what they're going to use the information for. They could actually clone your account without knowing your password. Just could be a new you. Okay, here's another example of a fake email. This is just stand up and wait. This is from PayPal in Australia. Basically, if you look at this email, the email address, or the domain is wrong. PayPalAustralia.com.au. It should be PayPal.com.au. So where it's from is wrong. And then, you've got the content's not right, the grammar's wrong. There's basically errors in the email, and something that PayPal would never issue. Go ahead.
Relating to accepting people as friends, there's a related issue which I want to ask you about. I often get people on LinkedIn who I don't know, but who seem to be more or less professionally relevant, and they want to be my LinkedIn, colleague or whatever.
Yeah.
Should I refuse those as well, or
LinkedIn's
not so dangerous?
LinkedIn's a little bit different than Facebook, because LinkedIn's more of a networking platform for professionals in business. So the same rules do apply, but LinkedIn's used for marketing, people looking for jobs, people trying to find jobs. It's basically somebody that's trying to be your friend, more than likely to either try to sell you something or possibly headhunt you. Basically what I would do in that particular case is I would look at the profile of the person on LinkedIn and see if it's somebody you want to be friends with for whatever reason. And if so, then go ahead. But LinkedIn isn't quite it doesn't attract quite as nasty a crowd as Facebook does. It's more of a professional business type crowd. So here's an example of a malware attachment. You can see that there's a zip file attached to this particular email. Now the reason they use zip files is because it will bypass a lot of computer security. Virus checkers may not actually open the zip file and check what's inside. Things may be blocked, like executables.exe files. They're generally blocked outright. So if you put an exe file inside a zip file, odds are it'll pass through a little bit cleaner than otherwise. But if you open that particular file, in this case, you're in for a world of hurt, and you won't find out exactly what that means until you do. So just leave the curiosity alone. Don't be curious enough to find out. Now here's another malware example. This is one that I received a few months ago. Basically saying, please review the payment. The password is blank, and there's actually a doc file attached. Well, the doc file is encrypted. The reason the doc file is encrypted is so that the virus checkers and any other security countermeasures you might have in place cannot actually open the file to see what's inside, because you don't have the password encrypted. But they're nice enough to actually give you the password. So you open that doc file, it's going to ask for the password. You punch in this password that they were nice enough to give you, and then whatever bad stuff's inside that file is going to open. In this particular case, there's some VB script in there that connects to the internet that actually downloads the malicious file and then executes it on your computer. So you're pretty much done at that point if you've actually opened that file and entered the password. And then I decided I wanted to know, well, where's this thing from? So these are the email headers. You may or may not have ever seen these. Every single email that you receive has information showing exactly where and what path over the internet it took to arrive at your mailbox. So the IP address in red that I've highlighted in red is the actual IP address where that email originated from. And I got it straight out of the headers. So I did a query. Where is this IP address? And it turns to be in Hanoi in Vietnam. Well, I don't know anybody in Hanoi in Vietnam, so obviously there's something that's a little bit fishy with this particular email.
Question.
Just wait for the mic. Go ahead.
Yes, John, I just noticed in a previous slide, it had on there, when you went to that IP address, it says there, remarks, send spam reports or abuse reports to such and such address. Do you advise doing that?
Yes, basically every domain everywhere will have an abuse address. So if there's some security issue with that domain or that IP address or whatever, if you send to abuse at that address, whoever's in charge of security for that company or organization will read that and deal with it. So yeah, if you get spam from somewhere and you can prove that it didn't come from Vietnam, it came from, you know, a company in the US or whatever, you could send an email to abuse at that company and they will look at it.
Can I just say something, please? At the request of the speaker, he asked Tony and I to hang on to the microphone. So
Yeah.
that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, we just need to keep it flowing, so I don't want to bog things down by answering long-winded questions. I want to keep them to the point and keep moving on. Here's another phishing example. I actually have a condo in the Dominican Republic for sale. I received this email to the address for that condo, basically somebody asking for more information. And I looked at it and I thought, well, that's kind of strange because he's telling me he's the CEO of an oil company. Well, that's a little bit more information than I need for buying a condo, but whatever. I just replied, sent him a link to the website with all the particulars. I then got this email back. Thanks for taking the time to respond. You know, you can call me or you can click on share documents. Well, as soon as I read this, the alarm bells went off. I thought, okay, there's something really fishy with this email. So in a very controlled environment, it's not to destroy my computer or anything, I clicked on the link, to which presented this page. It looks like a OneDrive login for the file, and I could log in with various email addresses. And if you click on the links, it basically prompts you for a username and a password. And I'm looking at this going, well, this is strange, and the first thing that looks strange is, look at the URL. mathsdiscovery.info. Well, that's not a OneDrive address. There's something really fishy about this. So I dug a little bit deeper. So I looked up the domain, maths whatever it was, .info. And if you look at it, it's actually registered in Panama. Okay, so why would somebody who runs an oil company in the US have a website and an email registered in Panama? I thought, okay, that's a little weird. Moving on, I also looked up the actual IP address, both that the server sits at, the web server where this is, and the email server that was used to send the email. And we're actually in Belize now. And then I took it a step farther and actually dug into where the IP address exists, and it's in Russia. Probably not a Texas oil billionaire trying to buy my condo. Somebody up to something, you know, very mischievous, trying to basically get my email, username, and password is what they're trying to do. This is an example of a spear phishing attack. They targeted me directly, by name, trying to get my personal information. So these are the kinds of things you need to watch out for. Here's another one I received to that same address for my condo that's for sale. And I didn't bother checking into this one, but it's basically saying I'm not getting all my emails. Please click on the link to receive your emails. I don't know what's up with this one, but something is no good. I just deleted that one. I didn't bother digging into where it came from. Now here's a good example of ransomware. This happened a few years ago. There was a story that was published online saying that Brad Pitt had passed away. And of course we all know that he didn't, but back then it was like big news and it was hitting all the media. Basically you click on this link and it basically installs ransomware on your computer. So they're basically using, you know, something of interest. They're using somebody famous as a point of interest to get you to do something you normally wouldn't do. You're going to click on a link and then, you know, who knows what's going to happen. And there was a lot of ransomware that came out with people that clicked on this link wanting to read the story thinking it was legit. So there's all kinds of ways that they're going to come at you, but it all comes down to curiosity. You want to know more about it. Maybe you don't. And here's another one. This is a hospital in, I think in the Massachusetts area that got shut down. They canceled surgeries and all kinds of things because ransomware got in and basically took out their computer system. There was actually one in the States last week, I believe, somewhere in the central US, a hospital got taken out again with ransomware, and then one in the US a week ago, they paid $50,000 to get their files back. But it could happen to you, it could happen to your computer. You click on one of these links, all your pictures, all your personal information, everything on your computer can get encrypted, and they're going to want money to get it back. Unless you have a backup of that data, it's gone. And even paying the ransom is not recommended, because usually it's paid in some sort of cryptocurrency, usually Bitcoin, which you can't get back, and there's no guarantee they're going to give you the password. And a lot of this ransomware is full of bugs, so even if they do give you the password, it's not guaranteed to work. So if you don't have the files backed up, you're probably done. So you do not want to get this stuff. And here's another example. San Francisco, the public transit system got hacked. All their files got encrypted. Well, these guys decided not to pay the ransom. They decided that, okay, we're going to go to our backups and we're just going to recover our data. But they couldn't shut the trains down while they did that. So they gave everybody free rides on the trains for 2 days while they restored their computer systems. So they wanted about $73,000 to recover the files by paying the hackers, but the San Francisco Transit Authority lost about $2 million in revenue because of all the free rides they gave out over 2 days. So it still cost them. And it was just some employee that clicked something they shouldn't have. Now, spear phishing I've talked about, and it's usually done as a form of social engineering. Some sort of attack pretending to be somebody that they're not. I'll give you an example. Here's another way to hack things. You guys are all familiar with USB sticks that could be hard drives. Your keyboards plug into USB ports. Lots of stuff uses USBs. Well, hackers have a little box that looks like a drive, but it identifies itself as a keyboard. You plug that into a USB port in a computer, and it immediately takes over the computer. No further action is required. So a hacker can get in fairly easily. Probably doesn't apply to you guys, but one of the things that will apply to you guys is, have you been somewhere where you need to charge your phone? A coffee shop, an airport, anywhere that you need to charge your phone. If you plug into the USB port, you're going to get power to charge your phone. But is there a data connection in there as well? Is there a computer behind that port that you can't see? You know, your phone might be hacked just plugging into the USB port in a coffee shop. Now there's ways around that. You can use the charger that came with your device so you know there's no data connection. Or they make something called a USB condom that plugs in between and blocks the data port, so you only get the power out of the port. Something to keep in mind. Careful where you charge your phones. And this is another way companies get hacked. Most companies have Wi-Fi for internal use. Well, there's nothing stopping a hacker from setting up in the parking lot with a fake Wi-Fi with the name of the company, saying please enter your corporate username and credentials to log in. So now you're going to get internet from the car and give them your passwords to your corporation. Doesn't really apply to you guys, but if you're in coffee shops, a lot of the stuff, any open Wi-Fi that's public, Anything you do, they can watch very easily, so keep that in mind. If you're using a browser with an SSL session, for example, to go to your bank, that transaction is encrypted between your computer and the bank. So that's safe over public Wi-Fi. But if you're doing something else, like quite often email isn't encrypted, they might be reading those emails that aren't. So keep that in mind if you're using Wi-Fi in a public location, like in this hotel, for example. Okay, so here's the example I referred about earlier. This is how you can get hacked. So we have a company here, Acme Construction Company. So somebody calls the receptionist. The receptionist says, "Hi." So we have Mr. Hacker. "I'm Bob Smith, president of the board of directors, or member of the board of directors." Receptionist, "Hello, Mr. Smith. How can I be of service, sir?" So we have a hacker pretending to impersonate a member of the board of directors, who the receptionist did not catch at this point as being an imposter. Mr. Hacker says, "I have an expense claim to send in. Can you please tell me, who in the department I should be, dealing with, and what's their contact info?" "Yes, sir. So here's who you're looking for, Mr. Cashflow, and here's how to get a hold of him." Mr. Hacker says, "Thank you. I'll be sure to tell your boss how helpful you've been." Well, this receptionist has been very helpful because she has volunteered some critical information to Mr. Hacker that Mr. Hacker can now use against the company. So now then Mr. Hacker drafts an expense claim and sends it to Mr. Cashflow, because now he knows exactly who to send it to. So now Mr. Cashflow, Hacker calls Mr. Cashflow. Again, Mr. Hacker identifies himself as Bob Smith, and now he's asking Mr. Cashflow to confirm an expense report that was mailed in. Did you receive it? Well, of course I did, because he knew exactly who to send it to. So now he thinks he's talking to the board of directors, or a member of the board of directors. Perfect. Can you please process immediately? Here's a trick. Don't give somebody time to think or do anything about it. Just do it now, because it's a rush. Don't put the checks and balances on it. And also, we have an exception here. I'm on the road. Can you please send it to somebody who you normally wouldn't send it to, and a different address? Again, violating corporate policy, but it's somebody important and it's a rush, so theoretically, Mr. Cashflow is going to be more than happy to do that. And of course he is. "Yes, sir, I'll do it personally. I'll get it signed and drop it in the mail myself." And now Mr. Hacker's very happy about Mr. Cashflow. And again, "I'll be sure to tell your boss how helpful you've been." Well, he's been very helpful to Mr. Hacker. And at this point, Mr. Hacker wins. And it could be, that's a corporate example, but it could be, there's lots of personal examples. "Hi, this is Microsoft. Your computer has a virus and is sending out spam. We need to, log into it to help you get rid of the virus. Can you start typing the following things at your computer?" That happens all the time. Well, number one, Microsoft would have no way of knowing that. And number two, Microsoft is too much worried about their bottom line. They're not going to call you and try to solve a problem. There's no money in it for them. But it could be anything. It could be your bank. Your credit card's been compromised. Please provide us the following information so that we can, deal with your credit card that's been broken. And they'll call you by name. It's a targeted attack. And it's all based on social engineering. It's somebody pretending to be somebody they're not, and if you don't challenge them, you're going to get yourself in trouble. I had it happen to me personally. The bank called me. They said, "You've been approved for a credit limit on your credit card. Are you interested?" I said, "Sure, I can use a little more credit." They said, "Great, we want to ask you some personal questions to make sure you're you." So I said to the person at the end of the phone, "Well, how do I know you're you? How do I know you're the bank?" And the guy said, "We get a lot of that." He said, "What you do is you grab your card, call the 1-800 number on the back of the card, ask for extension so-and-so, and you'll come right back to me." So I did, and I got the same person, and away we went. It was a real call. But it could have been a hacker. but I asked the question, because if I hadn't, it might have turned out ugly. This happened in the city of Edmonton. MacEwan University was doing a big expansion, and they had just finished the expansion, and the builder was Clark Builders. Had spent millions of dollars building an expansion, and were getting ready to pay their final bills, and somebody in the accounting department received an email saying that the account information for Clark Builders had been changed. Could they please update their records? Which they did, and then they started making payments to the new bank account number at Clark Builders, and after $10 or $20 million got spent, the Clark Builders said, well, where's our money? We haven't had payments in months. Well, we've sent you your payments. Well, we didn't get them. Well, it turns out this money was getting funneled to accounts in Hong Kong, and they're trying to recover it. It's all about somebody pretending to be somebody else and getting caught. And we have a question.
Talking about pretending to be somebody else, and the bank in particular, I was told, and I'm not sure if this is true or not, that if somebody rings you up, doesn't have to be a bank, and they put the phone down and say exactly the same thing that they said to you, you know, phone this number, you pick up the phone again, and you're actually talking to the same person because they haven't hung up their loop. Is that right?
That's possible, but only on old and antiquated phone systems. That can't happen on a mobile phone. It would have to be a landline using an old mechanical switch. I don't know if they exist anymore. But you want to make sure that if somebody says call them back, do not call them back at the number they gave you. Call them at a number that you already have on hand, because they could be giving you a bogus mobile number for all you know. So make sure that they don't give you the number that you call, and you should make sure that you dial the number and it connects. You shouldn't be automatically connected or something is up. I don't see that scenario happening today, but definitely don't call on a number they provide, because it could be a bogus number. Always do your own research and make sure that you know who you're calling and who you're talking to. So the biggest thing for corporations to keep people from hacking or causing their company to be hacked comes down to training. And I'm going to get into that in detail because that does apply to everybody in this room. There's certain security pieces that corporations can buy. Most of them are outside of the price range or anything that you guys can really deal with at home. Authentication is important. Usernames and passwords. I'm going to get into that in detail. And backups are important. I'm going to cover that. And disaster recovery doesn't really apply to anybody in this room. So training. Here are things that you should, be aware of at all times. Corporate security policy doesn't apply to you guys. Don't click on emails or links in emails. Very important. Never, ever, ever do that. Make sure you know who you're communicating with. Very, very important. If you're having a conversation about something in a public space, who else around you is listening? Are you talking about something confidential in public that nobody else should be hearing? This is a prime example. Is there anybody in this room talking to somebody else about something confidential that could be easily overheard? Anything can be easily overheard in this room. And back to the links again. Don't click a link. Manually type the link in so you know exactly where you're going. Mybank.com versus clicking the link to get there. Type it in. Don't reply to emails that look suspicious. That's another way you get spammed. If you get spam and they say click this link to unsubscribe or reply to this address to get off the list, don't do it. All it does is verify your address. They know there's somebody on the other end reading this stuff, and you're going to get more spam. Just delete them. That's all you can do, is just delete them and ignore them. Don't give away any personal information, especially to somebody you don't know. Don't open attachments in email. That's a general rule, even if you do know who it's from, because email is not secure and it can be faked. So an email you receive from your best friend might not have originated from that friend. Make sure, if somebody's sending you a file, you're either expecting it or confirm with them that you're receiving it. Don't click on the link or don't open the attachment on any email as a general rule. Any other question?
Yes, now, I've heard, could be conjecture that if you have like a suspicious email, would it be better open it on an Apple iPhone? I heard that, Apple has better security than, let's suppose, than my HP laptop.
Yes, that's technically true. Windows has got a lot of flaws in its design, and opening something on a Windows platform can lead to a catastrophic mess. Phones in general, Android phones, iPhones, they use something which is called a sandbox. So when the file is opened, it's contained into a small piece of the device. So if there's something malicious in there, it can't get outside of the sandbox, so it does minimize your damage. But it doesn't mean that there's not a bug or some other exploit in the phone that couldn't be taken advantage of to get outside of the sandbox, so it's not bulletproof. But it is a safer platform than doing it on Windows.
Okay, yeah, and I have Windows 10, a relatively new computer, and when they said, it says, you don't need to buy any of this extra spam protection or any of that. It says, I guess Windows Quote Defender will
No. If you've got a virus checkers are pretty much a waste of time. They might stop 50% of the threats on a good day. I wouldn't put any faith in them. Have one because it's better than nothing, but don't put all your eggs in that one basket because it's not likely to protect you. You're better off with common sense and just not becoming a victim by paying attention rather than trusting security software to protect you because it's likely not going to.
Yes, did you say don't click on unsubscribe?
Yes, do not click on unsubscribe in emails. If it's a spam, all it does is confirm that you read the email and you're going to get more. Do not click the links, just delete them because you can't, there's no way to get off a spam list once you're on, but you don't want to get on any more. Password management. Passwords are a huge problem. So, by show of hands, do you think you should use a unique password for every account you have everywhere out on the internet and in the world? Show of hands. Okay, it's not a bad idea. You probably should do that. Should you use a password that contains a mix of letters, numbers, syllables to make your password more secure? Show of hands, people who think that's a good idea? Okay, you're all wrong and I'm going to show you why. Here's the formula for calculating permutations. Remember the odds of something occurring within a range of a set. So let's assume that we have a password th1s1@p. Looks very secure. There's 94 keys on a keyboard that you could physically type for a password, and this one's 8 characters long. So in this particular case, there's 4.5 times 10 to the 15th power of possible combinations to guess that password. Let's look at a different kind of password. Let's look at a password. My blue horse runs fast. It's 19 characters long. So I'm only using 26 characters out of the alphabet, all the lowercase letters. So 26 with 26 possible characters to choose from, 19 long, is 8 times 10 to the 22 possible passwords. Way more secure password. You're better off with a long password of easy to remember words than you are of something that's cryptic. Because basically what's happened over time is that we've successfully trained everyone to use passwords that are hard for humans to remember, but easy for computers to guess. And a lot of websites will not let you do that. They will not let you put in simple passwords, but make them long. The longer they are, the harder they are to guess. So, should you use simple passwords of 14 characters or more, all lowercase, easy to remember? Absolutely. Should you use personal information or other common words and passwords? Anybody? How many people think you should? Which is correct? Anyone have a question?
Yeah, Brad, the problem with what you're saying, I agree. The only problem is a lot of things, like in my case, a couple of the banks updated their websites, and they require capital, symbols, and numbers to be in the password. So that my password used to be like what you said.
Yeah.
Now I have to add all these symbols, numbers, and
Yeah, you're pretty much screwed. You have to conform with their rules. What I would do is I would take a picture of that cartoon that I just had up there, mail it to Abuse at your bank and say, why are you guys being so stupid and behind the times? Because that's like 5-10-year-old thinking at this point. It's antiquated thinking, but industry hasn't caught up to what makes sense. All you can do is fight it. You're pretty much stuck. Should you ever click on a link to change your password? How many people think that that's a good idea? Cool, you guys are paying attention. Should you change your passwords regularly? How many people think you should change your passwords regularly by a show of hands? Yeah, a little less than half. Actually, the answer to that question is yes and no. If you use the same password for every site everywhere, then you should change the password regularly. Because if one site gets compromised, they all get compromised. But if you use a different password for every single site everywhere, there's no need to ever change them. You only need to change them if they become compromised, and it's only one site you're dealing with. So if one site gets compromised, change that one password, but do not change them all. There's no point, and make sure they're all different. So that's the reason why. How many people in the room know what two-factor authentication is? A few of you. Of those people, how many think you should be using it? Exactly. You should be using two-factor authentication. And here's what two-factor authentication is. There's 3 ways to do authentication. Basically something you know, which is like a password. We're all familiar with that. That's one factor of authentication. Something you have could be another factor of authentication. So a key fob that changes, where a number changes every 60 seconds, that's called a one-time password. An app on your phone with a number that changes every 60 seconds, it's also a one-time password. And this particular Bitcoin wallet will actually let you do two-factor authentication. Problem is, it only works on a PC, and it's really new, so it doesn't work with most services yet, but it's coming, and it is supported. So there are readily available ways to do two-factor authentication. The only gotcha is whatever site you're logging into has to support it. So if you're dealing with cryptocurrency or your bank or whatever, it has to support it. Google supports it for all their services. Facebook supports it. A lot of the big companies do support it, and you can use Google Authenticator on your phone to do it. It's a free app. You turn it on, you're good to go. So now, not only do I need a password to log in, I also need the number that's displaying at the box on the device at the time I log in to get in. It can only be used once. It's only valid for a few seconds. It's not really hackable, or not easily hackable. So you're way more secure. So if somebody manages to steal your password, they don't have your phone with the magic number on it, they're not getting into your account. It makes it a lot easier to break in. And something you are is the third factor of authentication. So a fingerprint, a retina scan, maybe DNA. So if you have any 2 of the 3 things, it's called two-factor authentication. And it's basically way more secure than just the passwords that we have now that are broken. Question over on the end?
Like what you said about the Google two-factor authentication, I'll get the word out right. Can you tell us more about that? That's something that's important. Can that apply to many different websites?
It's got nothing to do with websites. The Google example I gave is specifically for Google. So G Drive, Gmail, Google Docs, all of the Google services, you enter your Gmail address, your password, and then they provide an option for two-factor authentication with Google Authenticator, where you basically get the number on the phone, and you punch the number in when you log in. So these are the kinds of things that corporations can use to protect themselves. You guys won't have most of this. And they're trying to protect large infrastructures. The best thing that you guys can do to protect yourself excuse me, is don't do anything silly by being curious. Now, one thing that does apply to you guys is backups. Should you get hit with ransomware, make sure you've got a backup of all your data. Your spreadsheets with your personal information, all your photographs. Make sure you've got a copy of that somewhere that's not on your computer. And it should be on some sort of removable device, so it's not attached, so the removable device can't get infected at the same time that your device gets infected. Or use the cloud, something like Dropbox or OneDrive or Google Drive. There's lots of them out there. Store your data in the cloud. And one of the things that most cloud providers provide is something called versioning. So every time I make a change to a file, it creates a new version. So I've got the current copy, the previous copy, the one before that. If I delete the files, the deleted files are there, I can undelete them. So basically, if you get ransomware, it's going to happen at a particular point in time, and everything from that point forward is going to get overwritten with encryption. To recover from that, if you use versioning, all you need to do is go back in time just before you got hit with the ransomware and restore all your files back to that point in time, and you don't lose anything. So it's a very simple and effective way to deal with ransomware. You remove the ransomware from the computer, clean up the infection, and then go back in time to the point before you got the virus, and you're good to go. So make sure you've got backups of your data. Use common sense when dealing with whoever, and have backups of everything off-site and detached from your computer that you're working on. That's the only thing that you can, those are the two things you need to do to protect yourselves. Now, here's a test that you guys can try. And there's a URL at the bottom. Basically, this is a quiz where they present you with a series of scenarios, and you have to decide if the scenario is a legit scenario or if it's something malicious and unscrupulous. And it gives you an idea of how effective you are at detecting scams and hacking. So it wouldn't hurt you guys to go to this link and try the test and see how well you do. I only got 8 out of 10, and I knew what I was looking for. So it was a context problem, not understanding what accounts I did and didn't have to know if it was legit or not. But it's not easy. If you get a high score on that, your odds are you're going to be pretty safe using a computer. And that's pretty much all I had. Are there any further questions? Just wait for the microphone. Oh, we got a few hands. Oh, we got lots of hands. Okay, we'll start over here.
Hi, I'm John. Yeah, I think I did this test a couple of weeks ago. And there were 6 scam examples and 2 genuine examples. Or maybe it was 8 and 2. And I got all the scams right, and one of the genuine ones I thought was a scam, so there you go. No, what I wanted to ask you was, I've got all my music in the cloud, my music files, I've got all my photos in the cloud, I've got all my documents in the cloud, but are they completely safe there, or are people now starting to hack, take down from the cloud?
Are you using two-factor authentication on your cloud account? Well, there's your first problem. Do you have a backup copy of all that data in the cloud?
Yes.
Okay, if you've got a backup data of everything in the cloud, turn on two-factor authentication, you're probably good to go. And over here.
Where's a safe place to keep your passwords?
In your head. There are things like password managers. I'm not a fan of them, but there's no real good answer to that question. If you're using only passwords, whatever answer you come up with is probably wrong. There's no way to win this. What I do is I have a different password for every single site I use, and I have a formula in my head. So I can look at the website and use the website with the magic formula to derive a unique password for the site. So there's a pattern to them, and that's how I manage it. But there's no simple solution. You keep the password simple, use two-factor authentication, that'll make your life a whole lot simpler. And we got another one over here.
Hi Brad, you mentioned about miners for cryptocurrency. how do they do the fraud, and how do you check your computer to see if they've been able to infect your computer?
Well, if you click on a link you shouldn't have clicked on, probably in an email, that's how you got it. And the easiest way to tell is if you fire up Windows Task Manager, you'll be able to see a list of processes running and how much CPU they're using. And you're looking for something that you don't recognize burning up most of the CPU on your computer, because mining is very CPU intensive. So it'll basically slow your computer down and pin it, and you should be able to see that inside Task Manager. And that's what I would be looking for to see if you've got something like that.
Is malware, can it be self-extracting from an email, from an attachment, or from a pop-up?
No. Well, yes and no. It depends on the format. In order for it to be self-extracting, it has to be able to execute, so it would have to be in the form of an exe that's encrypted, or an exe zip file that's self-extracting. Nobody's likely to send you something like that because it's going to get blocked. If you're using something like Microsoft Outlook and have the preview pane turned on, and you get a window, and you get a Microsoft Word or Excel or PowerPoint attachment, that may open in the preview pane, and there could be macros embedded in there, and they could execute. But the later versions of Microsoft Office, they put provisions in there to warn you that there's macros that are self-executing. So maybe, possibly, I would turn the preview pane off in Outlook, and then you're pretty much covered yourself. Question over here.
Thank you very much. It's been very informative, first of all. I've got just 3 comments that have helped my security and 1 question. 1, I use disposable email addresses. I have 300 for every single different account, and if I start getting any replies from that email address, I delete that account. I also use separate accounts that I set up that I don't use, except in cases where they will not allow one of my disposable addresses, which do happen sometimes. The third point is if I get something from a friend, and this happens a lot, where things get forwarded, oh, this is a great joke, a great link, or whatever, if it looks suspicious for me and there's no additional information in the email, I'll send my friend a separate email asking them, did you send this? And the question I have is, and you mentioned this about under details under the header, I have found, and I don't know if it's a good idea, that if I reply to something that I am suspicious of, I don't actually write anything in, but if it says Bank of Hawaii, X questions, whatever, it sounds like a legitimate email address, but the topic is questionable. If I reply, it'll put up a different email address, and I know it'll be fake. Do you think that's a good idea or not?
Okay, your first point about disposable email addresses, I own my own personal domain, and I use a different email address for every site I deal with, so I've probably got over 5,000 email addresses that all forward to one, and if I get one on the spam list, I can just whack it. And I know which website leaked it to the spammers. With regards to, sorry, what was your last?
The secondary email addresses that you don't use.
Yeah, no, the third point.
Third point was if you reply.
Oh, replying to emails. There's a field in email called a reply to address. So if it looks like it comes from somebody and you click reply, it'll fill the reply to address in. That's not necessarily incorrect. My emails do that legitimately because of the way I have my emails set up. Generally, don't respond to anything suspicious, and make sure the email address that you were sending to looks like what you would be expecting to send to. Yeah, it basically comes down to common sense. There's nothing wrong with the 3 things that you said there. Over here.
Hello. Back to the Brad Pitt example. Just clicking on that, the curiosity, just clicking on it.
Yeah, that would be enough. Yeah, that's simple.
It wasn't Brad Pitt.
Yeah, just clicking on something can be that simple. In the back here?
Yeah, interesting to me because I'm a dinosaur and Simple Simon. The problem with saying I have multi-passwords on many of my programs, which you obviously advise, and the lawyer is telling me write it down, because if you die, we're never going to be able to get into your system. So that's one personal good advice. And I want to ask the question, what is keylogging and how sort of problematic it is today?
Okay, first of all, writing passwords down in the event that you pass away will solve problems for whoever your executor is, but it's a double-edged sword because anybody that gets access to whatever you've written down can now compromise your account. So it's generally not a good idea to write things down. From an executor point of view, they're going to be dealing with bank accounts and credit cards and stuff. Once you have a death certificate and a probated will, you don't need passwords. The banks will go in there and get around it. So you may lose some information, it's possible, but just keep in mind if you're going to write a password down for somebody to get at, once they get at it, you're done.
When I close my file, my file is Windows, my computer system. When I close it at the moment, and it hasn't happened before, a little box comes up saying, shall I, end program? Does that mean there's something running in the background that's not supposed to be there?
Not necessarily. It means there's something running in the background, and when you shut down Windows, it had a request to stop gracefully, and for some reason it's not. So now Windows is giving you the option to wait for that program to shut down or force it to shut down. Probably not malicious. The malicious stuff is usually more stealthy and not going to pop up that way. But it'll tell you what it's having trouble stopping, and that's your first indication of whether you should be concerned or not. What is not stopping when you shut down? It should tell you that in the window.
Thank you.
And we got another one?
Yeah, I might have missed it, but you didn't answer about the keylogging.
Oh, keyloggers. There's two kinds of keyloggers. There's hardware keyloggers and software keyloggers. A hardware keylogger is probably in the form of a USB stick that's plugged into the computer, or a keyboard plugged into a stick that's plugged into the computer. That would be hardware-based. A software-based one, you click on a link you shouldn't, it installs this thing in the background, you don't know it's even there. And basically what it does is it takes every keystroke that you type anywhere and it sends it out across the internet to somebody. So your passwords, your credit card numbers, all that stuff, they're intercepting and they might be able to hack in. So yeah, don't click on anything that you should, don't click on links in email. That's the safest advice I can give you. Over here.
Back to the Brad Pitt example, poor guy. What if it comes through on Facebook Messenger? All of the messages that go along, you click on them. Are those, can those have viruses in them? And also, on an Android tablet, is that the same as a cell phone?
To answer your second question, yes, an Android phone and an Android tablet are the same thing. With regards to clicking on a link, sorry, can you just repeat the question real quick? Just
Sure, on Facebook Messenger.
On Facebook Messenger, yes. Facebook Messenger is probably safer than email because there's some trust. You generally know who you're dealing with at the other end. So it's probably somebody you know at the other end of Facebook Messenger. But that doesn't mean that they didn't click on a website and copy and paste it into Facebook and now they're just passing it on. So your chances of getting hit are just as high because you don't necessarily trust that the person at the other end was using common sense and didn't do it to themselves first. So I still wouldn't be clicking on stuff that people are sending you. You know, make sure you know what the link is. Make sure it make sure it's legit. And another one in the back there.
I'm not very happy with the ISP providers that I plug in to my telephone line. So I'm thinking about a new computer that will use a chip similar to probably a cell phone chip and use data from that. Any security concerns doing it that way?
No, your risk is exactly the same. It makes no difference from a security point of view.
Well, my bank continually sends out messages, don't use your cell phone for banking transactions.
I don't know why they would be sending that, but I would disagree with that particular email.
On your left here, please.
Okay.
This unsubscribe, I get ones to the flights, telling me when the flights are coming down so I can book a flight in future. Can I unsubscribe that? Is that a website?
If you subscribe to those in the first place yourself, then those are safe to unsubscribe from. If you're getting stuff that you didn't subscribe to, don't unsubscribe to those. Only stuff that you actually subscribe for initially is safe to unsubscribe from. Usually they use a mailing list service like MailChimp or something like that. Those are fine.
Last question. Last question here, please.
Okay.
Oh, good morning. Recently in the UK, I had trouble with my window, PowerPoint and what do you call it? Office, yeah, Office, thank you. And I sort of looked on the computer to find a number from Microsoft and phoned the number up, and the guy on the end went through the network key with me, and it just wouldn't work. It's quite old, about 4 or 5 years old. Anyway, so he said, well, right, you need to get Windows 365, Office 365. So he said, let me link in with your computer and I'll help you with it. How can you protect yourself if that's not the right person? If it's somebody else asking you to connect your computer with them?
If you let the wrong person connect to your computer, you're pretty much screwed. If you called Microsoft yourself and you know you called Microsoft legitimately, you're probably fine let them taking over. The only difference between Office 365 and regular Office is Office 365 is their rental model, it's their pay-per-use model, so you pay so much a month for the features, whereas the version you normally would buy, you pay for it once for a licensing subscription and then it works indefinitely. That's the only difference. So Microsoft's trying to flip over everybody to Office 365 because there's way more money in it for them if they can get everybody paying every time you click something. So that's why they're doing that. They may or may not have been able to fix your other problem depending on what the cause was, but back to your original question, if you called Microsoft and they want to log in, that's probably the fastest way you're going to get your problem solved, and generally no issue doing that. Just don't let a hacker in or you're toast.
Sorry, need a microphone. Just wait a moment. And this is the last question.
Obviously, I now have to pay £90 a year.
Yeah.
The previous ones that he said were no good. Should they have sorted that for me?
Theoretically, yes, but older versions, they're probably not likely to. They want you to get to the new version, so they're going to want you to either cough up $500 or $1,000 for the new version, or pay the £90 a year. You're just on their new marketing payment system is all. You get the same product at the end of the day, but you will get newer versions with the pay-as-you-go plan. You won't have to pay an upgrade cost later.
Thank you. We've got time just for 2 more questions. Just here at the front. Brad will be available after the videotaping outside, so there's time for questions after.
Did I agree to that?
Brad, I don't think you mentioned virtual private networks. Do you think those add security to your systems?
That depends on what you're trying to secure from. As for what you're doing on your computer, doesn't make a difference. If you're trying to hide your location for various means, it's very good at that. If you're in a public coffee shop and you don't want things being witnessed by people that are in the coffee shop, it'll help with things like that. But generally speaking, unless you have a particular need for one, probably not going to add much value for you.
We've addressed many ways that you can get infected, but we haven't addressed what you can do about it if you have been infected. I use Kaspersky Total Protection, and that does quite a good run. Picks anything up as it's coming in, and intercepts it, and does a very full scan. How would you suggest removing something such as Bitmining or something like that?
Generally not, because you don't know what's in the computer, and the software is not guaranteed to remove anything. What I suggest, if you get infected, get your data off the machine, wipe it, start over, and then you know for sure. Don't waste your time and money trying to remove an infection. Flatten the box, start over after you get your data off. But you should already have your data backed up elsewhere, so it should be a moot point. But that's the key. Don't. You can try, but I wouldn't waste my time.
So please put your hands together for Brad Melrose. we should obviously all be safe online now after Brad's talk. And just one thing, I'd like to commend Brad and thank him sincerely from the club, because for the last few months he's volunteered for expats, helping expats with our computer show while they're still in Thailand. You go back to Canada, I think the end of March?
First week of March.
First week of March. So please put your hands together for Brad and all the help he's given. And here's a certificate of appreciation for all the work you've done. Thank you. Thanks, Brad.
Thank you.
And you're welcome anytime.
Anytime you want me back.
Next week.